When thinking about the most successful people of all time, it's easy to think of Walt Disney. From Snow White to the Disney Cruise Line and everything in between, his life seemed to be full of triumphs, achievements, advancements, and fame. When looking into someone's life and comparing it to ours, all we see is their fortune. What we don't see is the 7 out of 8 times they failed. Walt Disney may look like the ultimate model of success, but he may be a better model for that of falling down and getting back up again and staying positive through whatever life threw his way. Walt Disney was born on December 5, 1901 in Chicago, Illinois. He had 3 siblings, Herbert, Ray, Roy, and Ruth. When Walt was 5, his parents had grown bored of Chicago and decided to move to a farm in Marceline, Missouri. This was Walt's favorite and most memorable place to live, even though he lived there the shortest. There he had his first 2 major drawing experiences, the first of which, a doctor named Doc Sherwood, bought Walt's sketch of Rupert the horse for an entire nickel. Soon after this, Walt and Ruth were staying home while the rest of the family was out, and Walt found a barrel of black tar and convinced Ruth that it was okay for them to paint all over the side of their whitewashed farmhouse. When Walt was 8, his father couldn't keep up with the farm and had to sell it, and the family moved to Kansas City just after Herbert and Ray, the oldest, ran away. Here he woke every morning at 3 a.m. and ran a paper route that his dad had bought for Walt and Ray to run. When he was a freshman, they moved to Chicago, where he drew for the school newspaper. He tried to enlist in the Army at 16, but he was too young. He changed his birth date to 1 year earlier and joined the Red Cross Ambulance Corps, but he caught influenza and the war ended while he was in recovery. He ended up being one of 50 chosen to go to France to aid in occupation. When he got back, he was hired to make newspaper ads, but was then fired for not being creative enough, so he and a coworker decided to start a business together to make news ads. They then got a job at the Kansas City Slide Co. making moving pictures. They started an outside-of-work studio to make cartoons that they called Laugh-O-Grams. The employees were working for no pay, and they all slowly started to leave when money got really tight. Fred Schmeltz secured them with chattel mortgage on all Laugh-O-Gram equipment and products, and Walt had to file for bankruptcy. Walt went to Hollywood seeking to become a director, but instead of trying to find a job, he looked at movie sets and pretended to be applying for one. Margaret Winkler wanted to distribute Walt's Alice comedies that he had started in Kansas City. Roy and Walt teamed up and made the Disney Bros Studios, so Walt sent for Virginia Davis, who had played Alice, and he made more Alice comedies. He hired Ube Iwerks, and the studio was finally starting to succeed when Margaret Winkler married Charles Mintz, and he took control. Walt started finishing his cartoons earlier to earn more money and faster, but Mintz didn't like that, so Walt broke their partnership. Disney moved to a new studio and called it Walt Disney Studios. Mintz then had Walt make a character for Universal, so Walt created Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Oswald was a hit, and Walt was able to grow his company by adding staff. Walt thought he was finally succeeding until he found out that Charles Mintz and Universal Studios were contracting out all of his employees behind his back. They granted him no rights to Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and once again he had no studio employees or money. On the train home from New York to California, Walt kept promising his wife Lillian that he would never work for anyone ever again. While on this train ride, he sketched a cartoon called Plane Crazy about a mouse who builds a plane to impress a lady mouse. When he read it to Lily and told her the name of the mouse was Mortimer, she said that she made quite a scene about the name and told Walt he should name it Mickey. Distributors refused the deal. One company even said that a giant mouse on screen would scare women. Nonetheless, they continued making the cartoons and playing them in local theaters. Most times the cartoon got more applause than the feature film. Disney decided that he wanted to make a fully synchronized sound cartoon. When he told his animators about this, one told him that voices should not come out of drawings and no one will like it. The very first synchronized sound cartoon was Steamboat Willie. Walt had it synchronized, but he wanted both the picture and the sound to be recorded together, so he went to New York City to meet with sound companies to see how best to put on a soundtrack with the film. Pat A. Powers was one that licensed a sound system called Cinephones. In the first recording session, Walt spent over $1,000, and the session failed, and they were never able to get the orchestra in sync with the film. To solve the orchestra's problem, Walt made the cartoon with a bouncing ball keeping tempo so that when it sped up or slowed down, the orchestra would too. After successfully recording the synchronization, Walt signed to let Powers be his sales manager for 2 years. Walt showed Universal his cartoon and was positive that they were going to say yes. So, he started making plans. Walt was crushed when they declined. He showed his animations to Paramount executives and executives from the film booking office, and still neither gave an offer. After 2 months away, Walt had 4 sound cartoons, he was running out of money and time, and he still had no distributor. Harry Rinkenback offered $500 to show the cartoons at his theater for 2 weeks, but Walt asked for $1,000. Obviously seeing potential, Rinkenback agreed. Everyone loved them. Suddenly, Walt had distributors all over them, but they all wanted to buy his company, not just the animations. Pat Powers, though, would become his distributor, distributing films on a states' rights basis, franchising the picture to state and regional distributors for 10% of the gross Walt collected. Walt soon wanted to open recording studios in California so he wouldn't have to travel to New York. His next idea was to create cartoons where the animation was based off of the pre-recorded sounds. This meant that the orchestra would create a piece of music, record it, and then the animators would come up with characters and actions to fit the music. Walt then started hiring animators that had done Felix the Cat, the biggest cartoon star yet, to make these cartoons that he called Silly Symphonies. Walt didn't want to be reliant on one stream of cartoons in case what happened with Mints ever happened again. Now he had a backup. Walt made an agreement with Columbia Pictures to distribute the cartoons. Most knew of Mickey Mouse or Silly Symphonies, but this wasn't enough for Walt. He wanted to be the king of the imagination industry. He took notice of all the Felix the Cat merchandise and started looking for places to distribute Mickey Mouse merchandise. Harry Wooden launched a Mickey Mouse Club for kids where kids could go to play games, act out skits, and watch Mickey Mouse cartoons. All of a sudden, everything was growing and Walt's failures seemed to be all behind him. Until, all of a sudden, Ub Iwerks, who had been working with Disney since they were 17, asked to leave. When Roy Disney asked him why, Ub said that Powers was planning on starting a studio of his own, hiring Walt's animators behind his back, just like Charles Mintz had done. Walt, however, was not going to stand for it this time. When Powers tried to take rights to Mickey Mouse, Columbia stepped in and started distributing both Mickey Mouse and Silly Symphonies. After a long process of lawsuits and court meetings, the Disneys were finally rid of Powers with a new distribution deal with United Artists because the Columbia contract had expired. In 1933, the Silly Symphony, The Three Little Pigs, came out and became a huge success. After this, Walt had an idea. A crazy idea that would surely never work, according to peers working for other distributors. No one would sit down and watch a 90-minute cartoon. But of course, he did it. After recruiting almost 500 animators and 3 years of creating and imagining, Snow White became the highest-grossing film up to that point, topping out at $8 million. That's impressive since tickets were only 23 cents. Walt received awards, honors, certificates, and even a special Academy Award. His own daughter even asked for an autograph. His next movies weren't exactly flops, but they definitely weren't successes either. Pinocchio and Fantasia both came out while other countries were at war, and not many people were going to the movies. Walt now had a huge new studio, but since it was near an airplane manufacturing plant, he had to allow soldiers to use it to protect that plant during the war. During this time, Walt created military propaganda films, Insignia, and other to help with the war effort. Soon, Walt came out with Seal Island, the first in a new series called True Life Adventures. It won an Academy Award for Best Documentary. Then Walt produced Cinderella. It was the biggest hit since Snow White. Afterward, once again, Walt had another one of his crazy work ideas. He wanted to build an amusement park, one that was never dirty and not just for kids. He created a TV show that aired on ABC Network called Disneyland to promote it, and hired people he called Imagineers to help plan it. He made sure to include Main Street, which is modeled after the Main Street in Marceline, Missouri, where his drawing career started. He once said, "The thing that is going to make Disneyland unique and different is the detail. If we lose the detail, we lose it all." When it opened, a much larger crowd than expected flooded in, plus the 90 million viewers that were watching it on TV. He says, "Disneyland is a fabulous playground, something of a fair, a city from the Arabian Nights, a metropolis of the future, a showpiece of magic and living facts, but above all, a place for people to find happiness and knowledge." Afterward, he began to work on Project X, also known as Walt Disney World. His passing from lung cancer was very untimely. He never got to see his last dream carried through. When asked about Epcot and Tomorrowland, he would say the same thing, that it symbolizes the scientific achievements that will be familiar to the young people of tomorrow, as Main Street is to you and me. Now the name is everywhere. Disneyland, Disney World, Disney movies, Disney shows, Disney stores, Disney Cruise Line, and even a Disney private island. But as much as it all may seem,
I only hope that we never lose sight of one thing, that it was all started by a mouse.
Congratulations.
Mr. Big